You make me feel like my troubled heart is a million miles away. You make me feel like I'm drunk on stars and we're dancing out in the space. These are lyrics from Ed Sheeran's 2022 single Celestial. The song signals sentiments of romance and ecstasy, but also praise and worship. I get stuck when the world's too loud, and things don't look up when you're going down, and I know your arms are reaching out from somewhere beyond the clouds. This pop song is set in a world of disenchantment, where modern science and technology have seemingly robbed the world of its mystery and wonder. A demagication. We are made to be nothing more than this, finding magic in all the smallest things. When we notice that's what really matters, let's make tonight go on and on and on. The music video adds a visual solution to Ed Sheeran's existentialism, a re-enchantment through popular imagination. Sheeran's world is sensationalized through animation, rendering the singer in doodle form. And through the official art design of the Pokemon Company, Ed Sheeran indeed finds the magic in all the smallest things. Encountering cute, pocket-sized monsters as he sits in a field, cooks food, and records music. Western individuals are especially disenchanted with established religious institutions. Sheeran's ambiguous lyrics propose a complex solution to a disenchanted world, discovering magic through love, spirituality, and the existence of some metaphysical or supernatural benevolent force. As digital platforms offer more and more immediate forms of transcendence to users and consumers, popular culture serves many as an immersive means of re-enchantment. Most players evolve their Pokemon into new forms, make them learn and forget various battle maneuvers, and carry them physically on their belts within a 6-member party. The game provides a perpetually changing avatar to control, a trainer, with each Pokemon of the hundreds to choose becoming an extension of the player's trainer. The changing avatars of the Pokemon games offer a model for living in post-modernity. A subject undergoing the constant flux, always different, yet always the same. A blurry, relativistic morass, where identity comes from assembling bits and pieces of refracted culture. If identity is not fixed, you can create it yourself at will. You can be whatever you want. Thus, you can become a Pokemon master. But sadly, this is not a story of Pokemon's enchanting hold on its consumers. Rather, a tale of when the magic breaks down, fades, or is corrupted from within. Helix Fossil, give us strength. Enter Twitch Plays Pokemon! "10 years ago, you're old if you remember this. 10 years ago, Twitch Plays Pokemon allowed viewers to use a modified chat box on twitch.tv to directly control the avatar of the Pokemon game that was being streamed. It was a breakthrough moment for the platform, cementing Twitch in the eyes of millions as a digital space where participatory culture occurs via emergent gameplay. That's why we folklorists who run this channel love Twitch as a platform. The original goal for the game was one part organizational theory and one part schadenfreude, to see if it was even possible to organize a successful game with so many variables. Somewhere along the line, this social experiment turned into something primordial. Inadvertently, the stream recast the game into a myth, with players cast as the original disciples of an emergent religion, the Church of the Helix. To understand the religion created by Twitch Plays Pokemon's The Helix, we must first understand the mechanics of this online event. Usually, on the side of a Twitch video is a chat screen, which scrolls down comments as Twitch viewers watch and comment on the content being streamed. For Twitch Plays Pokemon, the ROM of Pokemon Red was hacked to allow commentators to directly enter commands for the game in the chat box. The game emulation software would register these chat inputs as if the buttons of the original Game Boy were being pressed. Thus, by simply commenting on the video, viewers were controlling the game. To be clear, this is a terrible way to play a video game, said Michael St. Clair, who writes in his review of the social experiment, an experienced player can beat the game in 8 to 10 hours. A first-time player takes between 30 and 50 hours. It is something of a wonder that the TPP hive mind, as fans came to call it, actually completed the game Pokemon Red at all. As Jenny Saucerman and Dennis Ramirez summarized the 16-day playthrough, the protagonist stumbled his way through the game. He spun in circles, attempted to use items at inappropriate times, and generally performed actions no competent player would do, such as naming a Charmander a BBBBBBK. Such democratized controls facilitated dispute over the group's collective playstyle, affecting thousands of people to watch, participate, strategize, but also produce art, music, videos, and wikis devoted to the game's event and experience. Marley Vincent Lindsay writes, oppositional identities based on differences in strategy were created in TPP as a player-driven narrative began to form, codified by specific Pokemon and items. Rather than employing a secular theme to navigate a secular space, the moment of confrontation was imbibed with religiosity. But why? The socially established playing culture of Pokemon Red could not be replicated online with these democratized controls. Twitch Plays Pokemon players competed for space and agency as newly emergent social dispositions developed into elaborate playstyles, similar to that of traditional role-playing games. Oddly enough, Pokemon has grown into the most successful RPG franchise of all time, but it's a franchise quite unlike traditional role-playing games, which are based on European folklore, whereby players select avatars of dwarves, elves, necromancers, etc. Instead, the role-playing framework is presented within children's fantasy, with game alterations made specific to the types of Pokemon caught, the teams assembled, and other choices made through the game space. In this way, Pokemon players always became their own game makers. Pokemon battles, Lindsay continues, were determined by the amount of information each player could retain on statistics for attack and defense, as well as what moves each Pokemon could know, and against what they were strong and weak. By these means, consumers became basic forms of producers. Pokemon represents not only a game to be made, but a world to be built. The cultural milieu of the Pokemon franchise was put to active use in the game performances of Twitch Plays Pokemon players, ironically affording players more role-playing options than before. As Susanna Tosca observes, role-playing means performance without a script, where players rely on basic character descriptions to behave and speak in appropriate ways as they go along in their adventures. This kind of on-the-fly collective storytelling is highly demanding and requires that players are knowledgeable of the setting, genres, and themes evoked in each particular game, so that their utterances and actions will make sense and be productive in story advancement terms. Imitation, quotation, parody, and other forms of metatextuality are common strategies to fill the storytelling gaps. We interpret the online response to this social experiment as a compromise to the sacrality of Pokemon, a brutal reveal of the monotonous mechanisms that structure the game. Many gamers developed external role-playing profiles and internet lore to motivate internal game decisions. What we're saying is religious discourse within the Twitch Plays Pokemon meta-narratives concurrently sanctified the chaotic playthrough of the stream. Religious iconography and rhetoric, specifically that of Christian, Greco-Roman, and ancient Egyptian traditions, were part of the shared cultural milieu of the Twitch Plays Pokemon player base, as seen in the fan art commemorating the event. The use of religious discourse serves a number of contextual agendas, all of which were governed by the community's propensity for metatextuality. That is, the acknowledgement of the said media properties' limits, but also its position with respect to other media. By alluding to Christianity, Saucerman and Ramirez argue, information about the game's significant events could be conveyed in a form of shorthand within the community. For example, if a comparison was drawn between an in-game character and a saint, it could be inferred that the character was good or at least popular with the majority of the people playing Twitch Plays Pokemon. Likewise, switching to a motif of Egyptian art signals a different interpretation of religious action, like that of a sacrifice or a ritual offering. Before continuing, perhaps we should familiarize ourselves with the sociological theories of Pierre Bourdieu to better understand the power of internet gameplay within this event. Bourdieu conceptualized that all social practice involves the use of select resources, or capital, within a culture governing the socially accepted use of said capital, what he called habitus, while all of this occurs within a certain domain of play, or field. Pokemon Red was then introduced to the field of online play and its governing cultures. Users online, or definitely users on Twitch in 2014, tended to express themselves with hyperbole, superlatives, and shorthand vernaculars, hypermasculine tones, and antagonizing personas. This is how thousands of individuals were affected to adopt confrontational playstyles that alienated or antagonized other players. Bourdieu's theory of habitus presents an approach to social gaming objectives, the individual and communal goals of reiterative gameplay. Like the habitus, these social objectives function as cognitive and evaluative structures. That is, a system that governs the way games ought to be played. Selecting a particular Pokemon, for instance, based on its accompanying artistic design, in-universe lore, stats, moves it can learn, and so on, function in service of various social objectives. In Pokemon Red, gamers pilot the empty vessel Red from town to town, catching, transforming, and battling various pocket monsters for any number of reasons, including competition, challenge, expression, discovery, completion, and the like, all of which function as distinctive clusters within the Pokemon habitus. If the internet indeed functions as its own field, with great effective potential, then the religious discourse employed by Twitch Plays Pokemon fan lore effectively narrates the divisional, confrontational, and trolling sociologies of online fields of play. So religion or religious activity in this video, therefore, belongs to a contextual complex of function, namely, religion as a recourse for meaning-making and devotion, itself a social imposition of order, intensity, and or ultimacy. Religion as a form of role-playing. Religion as the worship of socially constructed forms. Religion as the reification of social division. Religion as a communal narration of sacred events. For the purpose of this video, religious discourse functions with the power to affect its users and consumers in similar fashions. It provides a particular social disposition for action and the trigger of events. Actions and events within the game were thus retroactively made canon through narration and the generic conventions of myth. As defined by Muad'Dib himself, Alan Dundas, myth is the sacred narrative explaining how the world and man came to be in their current form. The narrative underpinning of a social base's religious beliefs. As mentioned before, at its most popular, 121,000 people were all vying to play Pokemon Red. Red seemed to just kind of like dart sporadically around the map as users the internet over clamored with keyboards to move him. Some of the earliest fan art portrays Red as a robot, never questioning his users' commands. But more interestingly and more mythic, the adjacent chat box was also personified as a horde of voices. These chat commands, also portrayed as the alphabetical Pokemon Unknown, spoke directly to Red, providing conflicting directions and madness. The commands of the voices led to gamic confusion and hostility off-screen as well. At times, landscape obstacles requiring a special move gained from exploring and interacting with non-player characters became difficult to use due to the complex menu navigation within Twitch Plays Pokemon's unique user interface. A particularly difficult obstacle, say it with me if you were there, was the ledge, due to the wasted time backtracking at every misstep, taking the Hive Mind Voices hours to complete what should have been a 10 to 15 second challenge of standard movement. By looping players' comments into the control mechanism, Twitch Plays Pokemon's playthrough was no longer synchronized or harmonious in respect to game choices. These novel dynamics of coordinated gamic disruption depended greatly on previous game experience and knowledge of established strategies, waking a corresponding set of social dispositions within individual fangamers and spectators, namely enemy, disorientation following social instability. Fan art depictions of the playthrough depict the reality of such rogue commands as grotesque collections of internet trolls, a hive mind of intense affective clusters generated by the frustration of player habitus. Certain Twitch users in chat began inputting either random or intentionally disruptive commands as to impede the gameplay of those trying to progress the game. Over time, these dynamics crystallized into two stabilizing calls for action: order or ruin. The latter effect, one of sabotage, is more dynamically intricate and vernacularly complex than the previous example of the ledge suggests. Trolling was perhaps the most dominant internet disposition to emerge in the Twitch Plays Pokemon chat, inculcating chaos and discord through oppositional communication and actions to disrupt the mood of digital space. These sabotage players demonstrated actually a critical knowledge of Pokemon games, as evident from some of their insidious coordinated tactics, including releasing valuable party members into the wild, frequently impeding progress using Pokemon transports as escape routes, therefore teleporting Red to the previous checkpoint. Rest in peace, Digrat, the homie. Purposely buying the wrong supplies at Pokemarts, wasting Pokedollars. Are they called Pokedollars? What's the currency in that game called? And routinely accessing the bag menu in an attempt to activate various items during battle and elsewhere. This is what happened to any item Red would find or get during the Twitch Plays Pokemon run-through. It would get selected in the item menu, Toss would get selected, Toss would get activated, which would throw it away indefinitely. If Red found a potion to restore HP to his Pokemon, wait in the chat, start, item, toss, boom, 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 throw it away. If Red found a gauntlet of trainers and won a nugget, which can be resold for a small fortune, start, item, toss. However, as in most role-playing games, there exist items that are called key items. Items which play an integral part in the plot of a video game and therefore can't be tossed or thrown away. This key item dynamic is the thing that produced the most religious parody within the game's lore, as the growing vernacular religious body online personified order and ruin and all of these concepts in two iconic Pokemon, Pidgeot and Ammonite. The Pidgeot, titled by the chat AAABAAJSS, or Bird Jesus, is the more self-explanatory of the two. If you've never played Pokemon Gen 1, Pidgeot is not one of the most remarkable Pokemon. In fact, it's one of the least useful. But in Twitch Plays Pokemon, Bird Jesus became the strongest member of the team, surviving various sabotage assaults and sticking on the team till the very end. Pidgeot became the savior of the run as the last Pokemon standing at the end of the Rock Tunnel dungeon, which they did without Flash. And in the fan canon, or the portmanteau fanon, he became the prophet, the forerunner of a returning god. Pidgeot stands for order. He's the last mon standing. He's the only one you can depend on in rough times. But the devotion to Ammonite, which is like the corresponding ruin effect that we said earlier, that stems from a particular origin, one that uses explicitly religious content as to intermix the mundane with the fantastic. The first key item available in Pokemon Red is one of two fossils containing the DNA of a long extinct Pokemon that can be revived near the end of the game. Players may choose either the dome fossil containing Kabuto or the helix fossil containing Ammonite. As chance or possibly fate may have it, the Twitch Plays Pokemon stream shows the helix fossil of the two. Finally, Red had an item in its inventory that he could not throw away, and soon, due to the saboteurs, the helix fossil became the only item left in the inventory. There is no god but God. Keep in mind that while key items are essential to the story, they do absolutely nothing in battle. Selecting one mid-fight will prompt the game script to reply, "This isn't the time to use that." While the Twitch Collective attempted to escape the maze of caves, the saboteurs delighted in commanding Red to open his bag all the fucking time and select the helix fossil. Each time the chat selected the helix fossil in the menu, you got about 20 seconds of lag that Twitch users were routinely deploying to delay progress. The internet came to a group consensus after about a day or two of constant helixing. The helix fossil was a god, and Red was consulting it through divination. The denizens of Twitch, no longer different from their pre-modern religious ancestors, anthropomorphized this key item into a sentient being centered somewhere within their greater cosmos. Mythology is defined by Greg Schremp as extraversive anthropomorphization. That is, the projection of human forms and characteristics into non-human realms. In this fashion, our human ancestors anthropomorphized the impossibly hot and bright balls of nuclear fusion in the night sky as beings. The realm of Twitch Plays Pokemon was an unintelligible hellscape of random commands and illogical responses. Fans used the Supreme Deity Lord Helix to narratively justify why Red refused to advance any further in the game beyond such theophany, which is a visible manifestation of the divine. The frequent attempts to use the helix fossil were rewritten by this vernacular religious movement into a ritual practice of devotion. Players interpreted this concerted effort, which does nothing in game space, as a form of divine communication, meditation, or prayer, a mini assignment and strategy within the larger efforts of disrupting the gameplay. A joke site was even created as a form of divination. Twitch players would consult the helix fossil, which responds in turn randomly with either an immediate action of the controls or an assortment of phrases taken from a magic 8-ball. Good times. As a delaying strategy, religion was used to convey a heightened significance for the actions of trolls and ruiners within the chat. Paolo Jadlowski argues that a shared understanding, conceptualization, or representation of past events remains vital to the forging of a group identity. The Church of the Helix, within days of the playthrough starting, became a concurrent collective memory in which the seemingly chaotic events of Twitch Plays Pokemon were understood, conceptualized, and represented within a mythological frame. The sensationalization of Helix as a god, or even just as like a memorable icon, cemented the player experience of the stream, an essential piece of the identity of any of the hundreds of thousands of chatters and players who inputted a command or witnessed the commands of Twitch Plays Pokemon. The Helix fossil became a totem of disorder due to its unique in-game affordances. Furthermore, because the fossil was presented within a binary choice, helix or dome, it suggested a Manichean struggle to its complement. The dome fossil, despite its absence from the rest of the game, was used within internet lore and fan art to demonize the anti-helix forces that challenged the saboteurs. This meaning-making exercise generated its own effective economy, and later created a counter-religious mythos to narrate the action of those playing the game as mechanically designed. Twitch Plays Pokemon eventually developed another bifurcation of social playstyles, as designated by the control of Red, what the stream's architect would later call anarchy, and a new one that got introduced called democracy. At the Team Rocket headquarters on day 6 of gameplay, democracy was unveiled as a new way to filter the commands. Rather than the most immediate input being used as the game's control, a series of tallies over a short period of time would count the total number of commands. The result of the poll, the highest voted action, would then be used to control the avatar. At key times, the core player base rebelled, and anarchy mode became a way to filibuster. At first, the followers of Bird Jesus, those of the Order affect, originally championed democracy until becoming outnumbered at certain times of the day, whereby they strategically switched back to anarchy. Meanwhile, democracy would also be used in the Ruiners camp, as in the case of Twitch user Destiny. Oh, fuck, that Destiny? What is he doing in here? I thought he's supposed to be debating his ex-wife. On the 11th day of Twitch Plays Pokemon, the stream caught one of the most powerful Pokemon, Zapdos, in Anarchy mode, as was the will of the Helix. Soon afterwards, a then popular Twitch streamer known for StarCraft 2 named Destiny, who now spends his time debating college students, pro-life advocates, and Ben Shabibo, led a campaign to sabotage the game, having been irked by its gimmicky success on his platform. Destiny and his malcontents successfully switched to democracy mode, claimed the majority of the votes, and used it to remove Bird Jesus from the team and potentially from the game. Red was ultimately able to reclaim Bird Jesus the Savior, but not before the voices succeeded in releasing 12 Pokemon. Reddit user It's Tyrellio was the first to name this moment Bloody Sunday, and it was memorialized through blog and image sites. Rather interestingly enough, when this event is commemorated, the day signals a lamentation of order rather than a celebration of ruin. Destiny is thus left out of the lore entirely. Instead, the culprits are the Dome Fossil and his false prophet. Fan art depicts the Pokemon Flareon and Kabuto laughing as the Helix's faithful are slaughtered. Destiny later listed alternative social objectives for this takeover and said in an interview,
"Progress in the game isn't actually beating the game. Progress is relatively subjective, but the definition I would give progress in this case, that most people give it, is that progress is the creation of entertaining content."
I'm not sorry that I did that. And yeah, Destiny, in this specific case, I think you're right. Because I think that's what the core base of the game being anarchy is all about. Because I think the Helix Fossil represents possibility, and Destiny put his finger on the scale in that moment. He tried to force a result. Destiny had an interesting strategy to make a memorable moment for the game, but as the Helix Fossil could have told him, it wasn't the time to use that. Destiny's goal to create new content for the stream was seemingly successful. He wasn't vilified for Bloody Sunday, as the community simply added this moment to the established myth and continued playing. Moreover, the faults and setbacks of Twitch Plays Pokemon were no longer any one person's responsibility. Destiny's faults were anthropomorphized at a large scale, revealing faults within the game's nature and community. And on the end of the 11th day, Red made it to Cinnabar Island, where the Helix Fossil was revived into an Ammonite. Those playing the game in earnest successfully assimilated the resurrected Pokemon once his disruption as a fossil could no longer be utilized by disruptors, along with the use of Omastar, his evolved form, in late-game matches. What is this voice I'm doing? Is this Mon Mothma? Equipped with their randomly selected nicknames and fan-given titles, the final team who would later beat the game was complete. The Helix and Bird Jesus led the charge. Zapdos was named AAJ and variously called Archangel Anarchy Jesus, Battery Jesus, and John the Zaptist. Nidoking was named AAAAAAAAA and later King Fawns, after the Happy Days character's famous greeting. AIIIIIIIR, the Lapras, was called Prince Air and Air Jordan. Finally, Venomoth, AATTVVV, was nicknamed the All-Terrain Venomoth, given for its versatility in battle, and after a fateful encounter where it bested a Dragonite, was also called Dragon Slayer. The team would be memorialized by the Twitch Plays Pokemon fan community as the Chosen Six, Numerous works of fan art rose across varying sites. A Bandcamp user who is goated with it, called Church of the Helix Choir, released choral music commemorating the victory of the Chosen Six, with song titles like Praise the Helix, Helix in Aeternum, and All Terrain Victory. All Terrain Victory is like one of my favorite songs ever made by someone on the internet. A God and an angel, a Messiah, an all-terrain being. In a true reference to the crowdsourced spirit of adventure that spawned the Helix in the first place, a crowdsourced collection of the Helix myth has been compiled, and it's called the Book of Helix. These Helix myths, from events represented in the Twitch Plays Pokemon playthrough to theorized fan origins of the gods, were bound in an ebook and made available for a free download. The cover of the book is resembled with the familiar cracked black leather of a small missionary Bible, insinuating that one is made to proselytize in the name of the Helix. And while that sounds unbelievable, it's more likely than you might believe. In February of 2015, a university student in Florida was physically assaulted in an altercation with a traveling preacher. The next day, the preacher was met with protests from the student body. Lots of signs, but specifically ones that included stuff like, the one true Helix will rise, or all hail the Helix. This is a god that started off as a joke in chat and now is evoked in snarky religious commemoration on and off the internet. As Duncan Bell writes, myths are constructed. They are shaped, whether by deliberate manipulation and intentional action, or perhaps through the particular resonance of works of literature and art, as we see here. The fan output and creation, the songs, the art, the sacred texts, and real-world appearances of the Church of the Helix are as much as a part of the sacred myth as anything that happened in the gameplay in Twitch. Thus, we conclude this video with an analysis of fan reception, the Twitch Plays Pokemon digital art that signals gamic social dismay. So we have come up with 3 reasons in particular why spirit possession is a useful idiom that thematically resonated with the player experience of Twitch Plays Pokemon. Twitch Plays Pokemon was a visual transformation of the avatar Red and his game space, for many, his character. The fractured world of the Twitch interface broke the seeming normality of a solitary visual spectrum into the latent code of Pokemon game controls, revealing the emergent game dispositions among the horde of online participants governing Red through chat. In select fan interpretations, the possession idiom was used, first to reconcile the erratic nature of Red's in-game movement, i.e., walking into walls, not being able to do ledge, and seemingly pointless habitual gestures of his Helix devotion. Red's face demonstrates the lack of agency afforded to traditional Pokemon players in either influence, stupor, frozen fear, or distress. Secondly, the theme of possession additionally supported why the Twitch user interface was explicitly layered onto the world of play, suggesting an external presence interfering with the default gaming experience of how you're supposed to play a Pokemon game. Third, the presence of running commentary or sequence code suggests a matrix-like environment that reveals the avatar's nature as a simulacrum or line of code. Consider this, the Furies, uploaded by Ragtime Mouse to Know Your Meme, and so named after the classic art of William Adolphe Bouguereau, Orestes pursued by the Furies from 1862. This meme shows an avatar directly possessed by a horde of external agencies. Within the Greek mythological context, the Erineas deliver to Orestes both madness and disease as punishment for his blood crime. For Ragtime Mouse, it seems such a curse becomes interpreted as the input commands of the user interface, tormenting Red, represented in this meme by photoshopping his hat, as he holds his hand against his ears to attempt to flee the influence of his possessors. Similarly, this image by Pied Frogs, posted on DeviantArt, reads, "This is what happens when 100,000 people try to play one game of Pokemon together at the same time." The original artwork shows the avatar Red, articulated via puppet strings, controlled by a massive Helix fossil that looms overhead. The fossil itself looks lobed like a brain, with small black holes of featureless hive mind members grasping at the strings. To the upper left and right of the helix are angelic depictions of those Pokemon who perished during the Bloody Sunday purge mentioned before. This early scene reveals not only the ultimate consequences of democratized agency, the player base hive mind's inability to save their best Pokemon, but also the artistic narration of sacred game events and iconography. The possessing fossil above the ship ticket and single Pokeball in Red's hands. Within this original artwork, one also observes Red, his face obscured by his hat, revealing no emotion or personality. Red is presented as truly an empty vessel, piloted around town, executing moves and decisions based on the whims of the voices. In contrast, a YouTube video by Tartaglia is set to the animated GIF with music by Ty Reflections, a song specifically created for Twitch Plays Pokemon. The GIF loops repeatedly with Red in the foreground trembling with tears, profusely leaking, without being able to move, as he stares up and to the left, with a shadow crossing most of his face. The commands float in midair, and the in-game interface appears and disappears every second, with the cursor moving down the menu to the save option. The frenzy and chaos of this song without resolution shows the helplessness and inability of the avatar to escape the chaos of the commands that hover at the various distances in the background. The vibrations of both the figure and text suggest a tension being held in place. In fact, the typical signs of possession states include behaviors like trembling, epilepsy, and paralysis, along with other involuntary effects such as crying, turning colors, and fainting. These embodied gestures showcase the inability to progress forward, as well as the impression of the playable character trapped in the white void of liminal game space. Lastly, my gods are not pleased by TikToks. That's not TikToks. That's the user TikToks. Continues this art with Red consulting the helix fossil directly. His profile shows mostly empty white eyes, with his right hand raised out, holding an impressionistic black and white version of the fossil. His monotone background is offset only by the red thought bubbles of the voices to the upper left and right, reading "My gods are not pleased." The artist's use of the plural begs the question, does Red view this hive mind as a pantheon controlling his fate? His gods unpleased? So what do all these images of mass possession have in common? The avatar Red is shown in either a neutral state, a void of personality, or an explosion of negative emotion, whether horror, stupefaction, terror, or suggestions of fury, as with the grotesque forms of the hive mind of the Rage comic. In line with the dominant milieu of Judeo-Christianity, the Twitch Plays Pokemon possession phenomenon is depicted not as a spiritual connection achieved between a divinity and a mount, but as a dark ontology, simultaneously denoting abuse and exploitation. These images convey a profound sense of a community-based nihilism, a form of sacred dread, whereby the Twitch Plays Pokemon player base is revealed to be disunified and ungovernable due to the compromising the traditional game habitus of what a Pokemon game is supposed to play like, and leading to a prolonged series of artistic mediations on the nature of gamic failure and despair. To summarize, the religious discourse of divine worship is used within this popular game event, first, to anthropomorphize and legitimize various forms of role-playing made available in service to Pokemon habitus and its disruption. Second, the religious discourse of warring factions is used to brand the polemical positions reflective of the community's various intra-group conflicts. And third, the religious discourse of possession is used to narrate and explain the in-game disruptions, both mundane and fantastic, brought about through the contested game spaces of the internet. In this regard, select gamers in the Twitch Plays Pokemon chat sought to recreate the stabilizing effects of navigating a clear assignment in a game and processing various game mechanics into their own kind of favorable strategies. That is, to play emergently, to disrupt or expand the lore of the game. Icons like Pidgeot and Ammonite are then only two of the many communal deifies created by fans in an attempt to make a shared religious experience as contentious in nature. We interpret the iconography of Twitch Plays Pokemon as an articulation of order and ruin, those effective clusters that temporarily possessed this online social body to start feuding. Red, in all his possessed glory, demonstrates a digital social process of narrative and artistic reification, whereby members of the Twitch Plays Pokemon player base express their condition of a digital being as a perilous and dreadful religious ontology, characterized by both modulations of agency and newly emergent social disruptions that seemingly corrupted the community from inside itself. Start 9. Riot. Thank you. Praise Helix.
Quilts have had me on many levels. Making quilts helped me to get a sense of my own space, sense of finding my way, sense of really working my way out of the labyrinth.